A young woman receives a marriage proposal from a man over 70, believing it could lead to happiness. She has no idea that a terrifying scheme of revenge is already unfolding beneath it all. Coffee. This cold should be free, Emma muttered, nudging the paper cup with a finger stained faintly by ink and fatigue. Outside New York, exhaled winter through steam grates and car horns, the city's breath heavy with disinterest. Inside the cafe, the heater coughed uneven warmth toward cracked linoleum floors. A boy coughed in the corner. A waitress swiped crumbs from a table with the back of her hand. Emma sat motionless, her coat zipped to the neck, her cheeks raw from the wind. She unfolded a crumpled bill, then another tuition heat. Something called a processing fee that had processed her into further debt. Her fingers paused on the last one. $213.57. Due tomorrow. She stared at it like it might evaporate if ignored long enough. You look like someone trying to negotiate with the devil, a voice said, smooth as a silk scarf but wrapped in gravel. Emma looked up. The man stood with a cane in one hand and a gray fedora in the other. He was in his early 70s but carried himself with the precision of a younger man. A well-fitted overcoat clung to a lean frame. His eyes were sharp, unyielding. Age clung only to his neck and hands, not his bearing. "Excuse me," she said. He motioned to the chair across from her. "Mind if I sit? All the other tables are taken." She glanced around. They weren't. He didn't wait for an answer. Emma shifted arms, crossing instinctively. He smelled faintly of tobacco and cedar, old cologne. Maybe. Something expensive. "You're a student," he said, eyeing her backpack, the half-read textbook wedged inside liberal arts, judging by the despair. She almost smiled. "Journalism," she said, "but thanks for the vote of confidence. Braver than most." He laid his hat on the table gently, like it contained something fragile. Emma noticed a thin scar across his left hand just below the thumb. "I'm Richard," he said. "Emma," he offered a short nod. No handshake, no further pleasantries. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the espresso machine filled the silence, then a rush of steam. Someone laughed behind the counter. Richard leaned back, eyes never leaving her face. "You're about to give up something," he said. "What hope or pride?" "Maybe both." Emma frowned. "You some kind of therapist?" "No," he said, smiling faintly. "But I've bartered those things myself." She reached for her coffee, then stopped. "What do you want?" He considered this. To offer something, he said finally, in return for nothing illegal or immoral, but something odd. "I'll admit." Emma narrowed her eyes. "A proposition," he continued. "And before you leap to conclusions, no, not that kind, though it does involve marriage." Her laugh caught in her throat. "Excuse me, I'd like to get married to you, on paper." "For practical reasons." Emma blinked. The moment expanded like a dropped glass shattering in slow motion. "I have resources," he continued. "You need them. I have legal reasons to transfer certain assets that become problematic if done through business. A marriage resolves that I get to tidy my affairs. You get financial stability, then we part ways. You're serious. Deadly." She studied him. The confidence. The absence of charm. The way he folded his hands like a lawyer, waiting for a counteroffer. "Why me?" "Because you're clever enough to ask that." Silence again. The room buzzed around them suddenly too loud. "I don't even know you," she said quietly. "You don't need to. Not for this. We marry you, get funding. Tuition, rent, food. I gain a clear legal channel. We agree on terms. No intimacy, no pretense, just paperwork. You really believe people would understand that? I don't care if they do." He reached into his coat and pulled out a card, sliding it across the table. "Think about it. My lawyer can explain everything. You'd have your independence. Emma, with breathing room. She stared at the name Richard Blackwell, Blackwell Ventures. She'd heard it before. He was on some finance list, once dubbed the Quiet Wolf of Wall Street. The courthouse ceremony took 9 minutes. No flowers, no music. The justice of the peace. Read from a laminated card and barely looked up. Emma signed the marriage certificate with a borrowed pen that stuttered on the paper. Her name looked foreign beside his. Richard stood still through the entire process, like a statue with a pulse. 2 witnesses, a man in a janitor's uniform and a woman with a Starbucks apron, signed without comment and left without eye contact. The silence after the door clicked shut was heavier than any vow. Richard extended a folded document to her. "This is for your records," he said. "The transfer will be finalized by morning." Emma nodded but didn't take it. She looked at the gold band on her finger. Too loose. It slid slightly when she turned her hand toward the light. "You'll find the house in Westchester quiet," he added. "You'll have your own wing. I won't intrude." "You mean you won't live there?" "I do. But I won't be present often." She looked up. "So that's it. That's it." He left first with the same composure he'd carried since their first meeting. Emma followed 10 seconds later out into a soft snowfall that made the city look gentler than it was. The Blackwell estate stood on a hill above a tree line that had long since forgotten spring. Its Gothic facade, gray stone and pointed turrets, looked less like a home than a place history had once passed through and then abandoned. The iron gate creaked as the driver pulled up. She stepped out, and the cold bit through her sleeves. Inside, the air held a scent of old wood and something sharper, lemon oil maybe, or dust disturbed too soon. Her boots echoed on marble floors, polished but unwelcoming. The entry hall stretched wide, lined with sconces that hadn't held candles in years. The housekeeper, a woman named Janine, greeted her with a polite nod and a file folder. "Welcome, Mrs. Blackwell. Instructions are here. Security codes, pantry notes, floor plans. Your suite is upstairs, East Wing. Mr. Blackwell occupies the West." "Thank you." "He prefers privacy," I gathered. Janine paused as if to say more, but then simply turned and vanished down a hallway that smelled faintly of cedar. Emma carried her overnight bag through the main hall. Her footsteps were the only sound. She passed portraits, none of them labeled, none of them recent. Then after a dozen frames, nothing. Bare walls, empty nails, ghosts erased. The East Wing was warmer, or maybe the radiators just worked better. Her suite had bay windows that faced a snow-covered garden. The bed was too large. The closet was empty, but smelled of lavender. On the desk lay an envelope with her name in black ink, inside a check. First of many, she assumed. That night, she didn't sleep. The silence wasn't peaceful. It pulsed, as if the house breathed through the vents, a slow exhale behind every door. At 2:11 a.m., she heard it, a sound like metal shifting, then faint footsteps, or maybe it was pipes. She sat up, wrapped in the quilt someone had folded at the foot of the bed. Her phone said there was no Wi-Fi. Of course not. The sound didn't return. By the 3rd day, the routine was clear. Meals appeared and disappeared from a tray outside her door. The lights turned on at dusk, off at dawn. Richard was nowhere. Emma wandered. She explored the East Wing, first unused rooms with sheet-covered furniture, a library with cracked spines and dust-laced sunlight. But it was the West Wing she wanted, the forbidden one. The hallway that divided the wings was wide but dark, as if the house itself drew a line between them. One morning, while Janine was out shopping and the driver had taken the Bentley to be serviced, Emma crossed the line. The West Wing was colder. Windows here stayed closed, curtains drawn. A long corridor led to a staircase that spiraled downward into dimness. She hesitated, then descended. At the bottom, a narrow hallway branched left, ending in a heavy steel door with a dial lock. On instinct, she pressed her ear to the door. Silence. Then a flicker. A light, faint and quick, pulsed from the bottom edge like a monitor turning off, or someone walking away with a flashlight. Her heart quickened. She tried the handle, locked, but she will discover it someday. The storm came on a Wednesday. Rain lashed the windows with frantic fingers, and the wind dragged the branches against the roof like a warning scratched in wood. Emma sat curled on the chaise in the library, the fireplace flickering low, a pen in one hand and a leather-bound notebook in the other. She had begun watching him. Richard's patterns were subtle but precise. Breakfast served at 7, black coffee with no sugar, 2 slices of toast untouched, a call at 10 always on speaker, always clipped. By 2 in the afternoon he would vanish into the West Wing. The steel door clicked shut like a secret locking itself. Emma wrote down everything, not for vengeance at least. That's what she told herself. But the house made questions grow like mildew. It was too quiet, too calculated, the kind of silence that wasn't absence but containment. She had noticed something new that morning, a framed newspaper tucked behind a bookcase, half hidden. The headline, "Blackwell Group Implodes. Amid Scandal. Founder Disappears from Public Life." The article was 10 years old. There was no photo, only a few cold paragraphs about investor panic and fraud allegations. It didn't mention names, not hers, not her father's, but something tugged at the edge of her memory stories overheard as a child, whispers about Wall Street, about a man who disappeared after ruining everything. That night, Richard left. No goodbye, no explanation, only a note on the kitchen counter. Out of town. Back Friday. The air in the house shifted with his absence. Emma waited until morning when Janine left for the market and the driver's car was gone from the circular drive. She stepped into the West Wing again, her breath thin in the cold corridor. The steel door looked the same, but this time she held the code. She'd watched him enter it the week before from the reflection in a picture frame 8194. Birth year anniversary. She didn't care. The lock clicked with a sigh. Inside was darkness and then light. Dim amber, steady. The room was larger than she'd imagined, lined with steel cabinets and black filing drawers. A wooden table stood in the center, its surface scuffed, bearing the weight of time and stories no one had told in years. A single pendant lamp swung overhead. Emma stepped closer. There were photos, dozens of them, yellowed, curled at the edges. She recognized none of the faces until she did. Her father, Thomas Carter, standing beside Richard in a photo from some gala, both young in tuxedos holding flutes of champagne, smiling like friends, like brothers. Her breath caught. She found the box beneath the table, metal locked, but the key hung from a nail behind the door. Inside were letters, real ones, ink-smudged, postmarked, scented faintly with lavender and age. She unfolded the first. Dearest. Thomas. I know what Richard did to you. I know why you left. But I'm afraid it won't be enough. He doesn't just want the company. He wants everything that was ours. The signature was a name she didn't recognize at first. Margaret. She read on letter after letter. They were from Margaret Blackwell, Richard's wife. But they weren't written to her husband. They were written to her father. Emma sat down, the weight of it pressing her spine into the chair. The final letter was dated a week before the collapse of Blackwell Group. If you don't leave the partnership, he'll destroy you. He's found out about us. He's planning something legal. Yes, but devastating, I fear, for what comes next. No sign-off, just an ink blot where the pen had lingered too long. Emma stared at the page, her hands trembling. Rain pounded the roof above a slow, relentless rhythm. Richard had known. He had known everything. She looked again at the photo, their fathers arm in arm, the past frozen in that single frame. But behind the smile was something else. A pretense. A crack. How long had Richard waited? Not just years, decades. Planning. Watching. She stood clutching the letters, the old air pressing in around her. Her father had never spoken of Blackwell Group. Never explained why their savings had vanished, why he drank in silence, why he died with debts and secrets knotted into his chest. Now she knew. She walked out of the room, slowly closed the steel door behind her, and reset the code. Back in her suite, she spread the letters on the bed like puzzle pieces. One question pulsed louder than the rain, louder than memory. Did he marry me for revenge? The gold band on her finger glinted in the lamplight. It no longer felt like a gift. It felt like a trap. Richard returned on a Thursday just after dusk. The Bentley glided through the wrought iron gate headlights, cutting through mist like knives through gauze. From the second-floor landing, Emma watched through the lace curtain as he stepped out. Coat collar, turned high, leather gloves, immaculate. He moved with the same measured grace he always had, each gesture deliberate, as if nothing in the world could surprise him. She waited in silence until she heard the front door shut with a low click, the sound like the closing of a verdict. Downstairs, the house held its breath. When she finally descended, she didn't pause. The letters were in her hand, unfolded and trembling slightly despite her best efforts. Richard was pouring himself a drink in the drawing room, a crystal decanter catching the firelight. The room smelled faintly of peat smoke and something floral, his wife's perfume perhaps lingering in the upholstery like a warning. He didn't look up as she entered. "I found the room," she said, voice low, controlled, "and the letters." Only then did he raise his eyes. Calm. Icy. His fingers paused on the rim of the glass. "I see. That's it. What response were you expecting?" "I don't know," she replied, stepping closer. Guilt. Anger. Even denial would be more human. He took a long sip, then placed the glass gently on the mantel. "Emotion clouds. Judgment, Emma. I've spent years ensuring mine stays clear." She held up one of the letters. Margaret's ink fading, but the plea still vivid. "He doesn't just want the company. He wants everything that was ours." "She wrote to my father," Emma said. "Not to you." "You knew. I knew," he said simply. "Margaret's betrayal was thorough. So was your father's." Emma took another step forward, the papers shaking now. "So you married me to punish a dead man?" "I married you," he said, turning fully to her now to bring back what was taken from me. Her laugh was short, bitter. "You mean control? I mean order, legacy, dignity. What Thomas Carter helped destroy with a smile on his face and my wife on his arm." Emma flinched, not at the words, but at the flatness in his voice. There was no rage left, only the embers of a long decayed fire carefully banked and used to warm nothing but memory. "You think this is justice?" she asked, "using me like a pawn?" He met her gaze without blinking. "You are not a pawn. You are a necessary correction." Emma stepped back, the letters falling from her hand like feathers catching in a draft. Her breath hitched, not from sadness, but disgust. Not only at him, but at herself, forever mistaking the man before her for a savior, for confusing manipulation with mercy. "I trusted you," she whispered. "No," he said, his voice soft. "You needed me. That's not the same thing." She turned, nearly stumbling over the edge of the rug. The room tilted slightly, the edges of the fireplace swimming in the corners of her vision. She reached the hallway and braced herself against the doorframe. "Emma," Richard said behind her. Not moving, she didn't look back. "I gave you everything your father took from me. And more, if that feels like punishment." Perhaps the scales were already tipped too far. The next morning came gray and still. The house was quiet, but not in the same way. It had shifted something broken that refused to echo the same way again. Emma lay on the couch in the library, wrapped in a blanket that still carried the faint scent of mothballs and cedar. She hadn't cried. Not once, but her hands ached from clenching. By noon, she dressed, slipped her notebook into her bag, and took the train into the city. She hadn't been back to Manhattan since the day of the courthouse wedding. As the skyline emerged through the fogged glass, she felt something tighten around her ribs, a quiet panic that threatened to bloom. But she had a name, one name she trusted. Chloe Martin. The law office was tucked inside a brownstone on the Upper West Side. Nothing flashy, just clean walls, quiet floors, and warm lighting. Chloe greeted her with a hug that lasted a second too long. "I should have called Emma," said. "You don't have to," Chloe replied. "Not with me." In a back office with tea steeping on the desk and a framed photo of their college graduation watching over them, Emma unfolded the story. Slowly, carefully, like removing stitches, she told Chloe everything about the marriage, the documents, the letters, the locked room, and the man who thought justice meant reconstruction through ruin. When she finished, Chloe leaned back, arms crossed. "This is deep," she said. "Too deep to fix with courtroom sympathy." "I don't want sympathy," Emma said. "I want to know the truth. Then we'll need help." Chloe opened her desk drawer and pulled out a card. White clean, unmarked, except for the name printed in serif type. Ethan Ross. He's the one people call when truth gets buried in offshore accounts and paper walls. Is he trustworthy? He's expensive, which usually means dangerous to the right people. Emma looked at the card. The name pulsed in her palm like a lifeline or a fuse. The hallway outside Ethan Ross's office smelled faintly of old toner and industrial carpet cleaner. It was a narrow corridor tucked inside a 6-story building on the east side. No sign, no reception, just a frosted glass door with his name etched in small, firm letters. Emma hesitated before knocking. Her hand hovered, then landed once, twice on the glass. A voice answered, "Come in." Inside the light was low but clean. No clutter, just filing cabinets, a scarred wooden desk, and a man in his early 40s, gray at the temples, sleeves, rolled tie loosened. He didn't stand, but he looked up, and for a long second said nothing. "You're Carter's daughter," Ethan said, more statement than question. Emma nodded. "And Richard Blackwell's wife." "That part," he muttered, "makes things complicated." He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat, fingers still wrapped tightly around her bag. When she pulled out the letters and the financial documents Chloe had helped organize, he didn't reach for them right away. "I've looked into Blackwell before," he said. "But he's like Mercury shifts shape, slips through gaps, the kind of man who learned long ago that silence builds power." Emma laid the papers on his desk. "Then I want to be louder than his silence." Ethan's eyes flicked to the letters. Then to her, "Are you sure you want this?" "Yes," she said, "and I'm not asking for safety. I'm asking for the truth." He opened a drawer, pulled out a manila folder, and slid it toward her. "We start here." The days blurred. Emma spent hours in Ethan's office sifting through documents, corporate shells, offshore accounts registered in Panama, old email headers, wire transfers buried in vague invoices. Ethan worked methodically, tracing paths that had been scrubbed clean. What they found stunned even him. Blackwell Ventures was the funnel, he said, pointing at a flow chart with red ink bleeding into blue lines. But this is the system. The lines led everywhere. Lobbyists, super PACs, foreign mining contracts, private security firms with government contracts in unstable regions. Some companies existed for mere weeks before folding. Others operated under new names with old directors. And through it all, Richard Blackwell. But the deeper they dug, the more Emma's own past tangled into the web. In a sealed envelope tucked behind a defunct Cayman Islands registration, Ethan uncovered a letter marked confidential and dated 2 years before her father's death. It was from Thomas Carter. "To whom it may concern, I can no longer be party to this. What began as ambition became rot. If anything happens to me, tell my daughter I tried to walk away before it swallowed me." Emma sat still for a long moment, eyes burning but dry. She didn't speak. Ethan didn't push. Her father hadn't been innocent, but he hadn't been heartless either. He had tried to leave, and in doing so, he may have signed his death warrant. It wasn't long before the pressure came. Chloe called one night, voice tight. "I got a package." "What kind?" "No return address." Inside, just one thing. A photo. "You, me, and your father taken from that beach trip when we were 17. But there's a red circle drawn around your face." Emma gripped the phone. "It's a warning. They're watching us." She hung up and turned to Ethan. He already had the security footage pulled from the building's hallway. A shadowy figure hoodie-up camera ducked. They left nothing but the envelope and a message that didn't need words. "Richard knows," Emma whispered. "He's known," Ethan replied. "But now he's responding." That night, she returned to the Blackwell estate. She passed the library without pausing, climbed the stairs and went straight to the safe behind the portrait in the west wing. The combination came easily now. Inside were backup drives, password protected but not beyond Ethan's reach. She took everything. Back in her suite, she placed a recording device in her pocket and walked the halls until she found Richard sitting in the conservatory lights, dimmed a book in his lap. He didn't look surprised. "You've been busy," he said. "I learned from the best," she replied. He closed the book. "You think you understand what you've stepped into?" "I understand enough. You built an empire on shadows and grief. I built it because your father took everything that wasn't nailed down," he said coldly. "Because he broke the only rule that mattered. And what was that? Don't lie to a man who has nothing left to lose." She pressed record in her pocket. His voice dropped lower. "If you continue, Emma, you won't just lose your money. You'll lose your name, your freedom, maybe your life." Emma leaned in. "Then take your best shot." She left the room without another word. The press conference was held in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. Anonymous sources, quiet invites, no headlines yet. Chloe stood beside her. Ethan worked the slides. Journalists took notes. Emma stood behind the podium, heart pounding like a gavel. "My name is Emma Carter Blackwell," she began. "And what you're about to see isn't just fraud. It's not just corruption. It's a blueprint for how power hides in plain sight." She paused, fingers grazing the gold wedding band she no longer wore. Today, everything would end. They came for him the next morning, not with sirens or spectacle, just two unmarked cars, 4 agents in charcoal suits, and the thud of measured footsteps on Blackwell marble. Richard answered the door himself. He wore a dark wool coat over his usual tailored vest. Collar, crisp silver cufflinks understated. He didn't resist, didn't speak. As they read his rights, he turned briefly toward the east wing where Emma once slept, then followed them into the frost-lined dawn. The house watched him go without protest. The courtroom held a chill that the radiators couldn't fight. Emma sat in the front row beside Chloe, her hands clasped together as if in prayer, but without any belief left. Ethan sat behind them, silent and steady eyes trained on every movement with the quiet calculation of a man too used to secrets. Richard stood before the judge like a monument still unreadable. His legal team cut through procedural noise with polished ease, but the prosecution had paper files, audio, her voice. His voice, money trails twisted into knots they could finally untangle. Every piece of evidence was a nail. Each one drove deeper. Emma testified on the third day. She wore a navy dress, simple but deliberate. No jewelry. When she walked to the stand, the courtroom stilled. She didn't look at him. Instead, she spoke of the marriage, of the estate, of the locked door, and the letters, and the web they'd uncovered together. She spoke of truth as something earned, not given. Her voice didn't shake, but her chest ached after each word like she'd been running. Richard never looked away, but he never spoke either. When cross-examined, the defense called her opportunistic, disloyal, ambitious. One attorney implied she had always planned to betray him. Another asked if her father's sins were really hers to atone for. Emma answered with calm, only once, letting her voice break. "What I inherited wasn't guilt," she said. It was silence. And I chose not to pass it on. Outside, reporters swarmed like hungry birds. Some held microphones, others held opinions. The narrative split down the middle. One camp called her a whistleblower, brave and brilliant. Another labeled her a manipulator, a young woman who married for money and stayed for power. Emma stopped reading the headlines after the second week. The verdict came on a rainy Thursday. Guilty on all counts: money laundering, tax evasion, conspiracy, obstruction. He was sentenced to 17 years in federal prison. He didn't flinch. Emma exhaled only once, quiet, controlled, as if the breath had been stored for months. She didn't stay for the final gavel. Back at the Blackwell estate, she packed without ceremony. The halls echoed more now, stripped of illusion. The portraits were gone. The steel door stood open. What secrets it held had already fled the light. She sold the property within weeks. Half the money went to a scholarship fund for underprivileged students in finance and law. The rest went to nonprofit watchdog groups, people like Ethan who hunted shadows and forced them into the sun. She rented a small apartment in the city, a walk-up with chipped paint and warm floors. The first morning she woke there, it rained. She smiled, not because things were easy, but because they were hers. The letter came in mid-autumn. It was written in tight, neat cursive on heavy paper. No return address, no plea for forgiveness, just a quiet unraveling. Emma. They say clarity comes with stillness. I didn't believe that, still don't entirely. But there is something about silence that leaves no room for lies. You were never meant to be part of this. I chose you because you were the only name I could not escape. A Carter. Your father's daughter. The only way left to reach him. I believed I could keep the pain as a ledger, balance the grief like a budget. I was wrong. You were never a tool. I just forgot how to see people when all I could see was debt. Forgive or don't, but live. You deserve to live. Richard. She read it twice, then once more aloud. The voice in her head sounded younger than his, and maybe that was the saddest part of all. Chloe visited often now. She'd started her own legal firm, specializing in corporate abuse, white-collar retaliation cases, financial justice. Her logo was a scale etched in red. Ethan still worked alone, always between cities, always chasing trails. Others missed. He sent Emma clippings, encrypted files, and sometimes just one-word texts. Truth, safe watch. They had their rhythms now. No promises, no illusions, just mutual trust, and an understanding that scars once earned don't vanish, but they can stop bleeding. On the final day of the year, Emma stood on a quiet beach in Maine. The waves moved like breath, slow, certain, unafraid. She held Richard's letter in her hand. The wind tugged at the corners. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tore it in half, then again and again, until it fluttered like ash from her palms. She let the pieces scatter into the sea. A single tear traced her cheek, warm against the salt air. She didn't wipe it. It wasn't for regret or grief. It was for the strange tenderness that had once tried to bloom in a poisoned garden. She watched the tide take, the paper, watched until there was nothing left. And then she turned and walked forward. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share it. Leave a comment to tell us how it inspired you, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, may God bless you and be with you every step of the way.